Thank you. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. I was elected in 2014, and immediately upon arriving in Washington, I sought out a seat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And one of the reasons why I wanted to be on the Foreign Affairs Committee is my district has more religious minorities perhaps than any other district in the country. We have a large population of Chaldeans and Assyrians and Copts and others. And I've tried to use my time and energy here in Washington to draw attention to the atrocities affecting religious minorities, particularly Christians. My first trip as a congressman, I decided to go to Armenia to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the genocide from 1915. And it was an interesting trip because we got there, and on the day of the commemoration in Yerevan at the top of a mountain where the monument is and the memorial is, it was a rainy day, it was 40 degrees, it was windy, and it was cold. And it was about a 2.5-hour ceremony, and it quickly became apparent that we were going to freeze up there for a couple hours. The Russians, and Putin was sitting in front of us, and they brought the Russians blankets, but they didn't bring Americans blankets. And here's why. Even though Senator Obama called what happened in Armenia a genocide, as president he's chosen not to out of concern over the Turks because they're our supposed ally. I ask you, what kind of ally contorts some kind of convoluted theory that we're somehow behind the recent coup attempt there and we're worried about offending the Turks? I think we need to do the right thing and call what happened in Armenia a genocide. My next effort was to send a letter to the president because in 2013, before I got here, Congress created a position in the State Department, Special Advisor to Secretary Kerry for religious minorities. And it took the president almost a year to fill that position. So we wrote the president, he finally filled that position. He filled it with a good man. Knox Thames is the gentleman's name. He's the Special Advisor to Secretary Kerry. And I'm proud to tell you that Mr. Thames' first trip after he became the Special Advisor for religious minorities to Secretary Kerry was to my district. And we filled that day with a very busy day with meetings with the Chaldean community, the Armenian community, the Assyrian community, and the Copts. And it was a very productive day, and we gave him a Tigers baseball hat, and I think we made some progress, in part because the day before he arrived in my district, Secretary Kerry finally, perhaps it was the House bill that I co-sponsored, perhaps it was Mr. Thames' visit to my district, but the day before he came to my district, Secretary Kerry finally called what's happening to the Christians in the Middle East a genocide. Now we need to take some action. The other thing we've worked on is President Obama's refugee policy. The president has gotten something like 10,800 Syrians admitted as refugees. I believe 56 of them are Christians, 0.5%. The Christians make up 10% of the population in Syria. There's something wrong with the selection process. With respect to the Copts, I've been a frequent visitor to St. Mark's Church in Troy. First time I went there was to extend my condolences over the 21 Copts that were brutally murdered in Libya. I was proud to invite Father Mina from the Coptic Church in Troy to be the first Coptic priest to ever serve as guest chaplain in the house. He came and led the house in prayer. With respect to the Copts, we had Secretary Kerry before the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and we asked him why he entertained the Muslim Brotherhood at the State Department and had meetings with them. He claimed not to know that they were from the Muslim Brotherhood. We had the former ambassador to Egypt before the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I asked her whether her insouciance towards the Muslim Brotherhood perhaps exacerbated some of the tragedies that have affected the Copts in Egypt. She didn't like the question. I asked her about the 70-year-old Christian woman in Minya who had been stripped down naked by Muslims who thought that her son was a Christian, and she was embarrassed. And the solution of the Egyptian government was to have reconciliation sessions. What an insult. I introduced a bill this week to call for the Coptic Church Accountability Act. In August of 2013, the Muslim Brotherhood destroyed something like 76 churches in Egypt. President Sisi promised to rebuild those churches. I think 26 of them have been rebuilt. We need to keep the pressure on the Egyptian government to do the right thing. As I close my first term, I think the report card on our work is somewhat mixed. I'd like to think that Mr. Thames' visit to my district somehow was responsible for Secretary Kerry calling what's happening to Christians in the Middle East a genocide. We've had some successes, but sometimes we haven't moved the needle. But the frank reality is we have to keep trying. We have to keep talking about the persecution of Christians. We have to keep putting pressure on our friends. Some of those friends we give an awful lot of military aid to do the right thing. We have to keep calling out our enemies anytime they encourage or tolerate tolerance against Christians. And we have to keep reminding our president, whoever he or she may be, the United States has to lead on this issue. Maybe a Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, maybe a floor speech, maybe an op-ed will make, maybe a bill, maybe all of you being here will make a difference, but we have to keep trying. Very briefly, a few months back, we were debating a bill to deal with the Iran nuclear pact that the president reached. And we introduced a bill on the House floor to try and unravel parts of that deal because we didn't think Iran was keeping its end of the bargain. And Ranking Member Engel on the Foreign Affairs Committee, for whom I have a lot of respect, stood up and said, "Why are we debating this bill? Even if it passes the House, the Senate won't take it up, and even if the Senate were to take it up and pass it and send it to the President, it has no chance of being signed." And he's correct. I don't think it was a waste of time, though. Because when it comes to the persecution of religious minorities and Christians, or it comes to holding Iran accountable on its deal, we have to keep trying, and just by talking about it, I hope we make a difference. These are difficult days for Christians. I believe President Obama's foreign policy has made the problem worse. The Obama Doctrine, if you look at the April issue of Atlantic Monthly, it's a very interesting article that looks at the decision matrix for President Obama's foreign policy. And it's pretty simple. The President doesn't believe the United States should be involved unless the problem poses a direct threat to our country. Well, when you call ISIS a JV team and you ignore them, and a red line in Syria doesn't mean anything, then countries like Russia and China and North Korea and Iran and terrorists feel like they can do anything they want. The reality is the United States has to lead. We have to be responsible and take the lead in the protection of Christians for a few reasons. First, it's the right public policy. Second, it's our moral obligation. And finally, because no one else will do it. As we look towards 2017, I'm not sure we're going to see the change we need, candidly. Hillary Clinton is part and parcel of President Obama's foreign policy, and she may continue to not make the protection of Christians around the world a priority. Trump, best I can discern, is probably an isolationist in the context of put America first, may very well make a case for not standing up for Christians around the world. And then this morning, the libertarian Gary Johnson didn't know where or what Aleppo was. True story. Let me close by thanking all of you, not only for the invitation to be here, but also, more importantly, for everything you do. You help with relief efforts. Your commitment to your family and friends back home is important. Your effort to provide health services and health care and services to people, and you draw attention and awareness to this problem. Sadly, these efforts make more of a difference than anything we're doing at the moment here in Washington. You're doing God's work, and it's an honor to be with you. And I want to close with a quote from Teddy Roosevelt. It makes me think of all of your hard work and your being here today. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, like all of you, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, and who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, who knows great enthusiasm and great devotion, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.